So as I was editing this video, a bomb dropped by The Hollywood Reporter detailing exactly what went wrong behind the scenes for Supergirl, which led it to end up in the state it was released in. To summarize, there seemed to be some tension between Craig Gillespie and James Gunn over the final cut of the film, with Gillespie's OG cut being 11 minutes longer and featured a more developed Krem, but James Gunn bringing in his Guardians of the Galaxy editor to recut the film and ordering reshoots written by Jeremy Slater, who doesn't really have that good of a track record, but most of these issues revolved around the final act of the film, which we can all agree was the weakest part. Test screenings were said to never have crossed the 70s out of 100 with either cut, meaning the studio knew that the end product was not stellar by any means, with the movie never really taking shape in post-production. But ultimately, after many rounds of test screenings, the studio cut edged out the win, and it was what ended up being released. Another point to note is that in some test screenings, the final needle drop was a cover of Girls Just Wanna Have Fun, which I think would have been the better choice, but I have no clue why they even wanted a cover in the first place rather than the original song, or even using Call Me, which was used heavily in tandem with the movie and in the marketing and advertisements, but ended up not even being featured in the film. To analyze this all, it's just sad that DC keeps falling into the same issues with director's cuts, but I have no clue why these issues are only being weaponized against DC. I can assure you every major blockbuster has studio cuts and director's cuts, but the narrative of release so-and-so's cut never takes shape for Marvel or any other franchise, only DC. Ultimately, I don't think this is a DCEU type situation because the final cut was still very similar to Craig Gillespie's original cut, and there seems to be no bad blood between him and James Gunn. I also don't think this is cause for alarm for the DCU because James Gunn has many safety nets to fall back on, but a weak film this early on in the DCU with this kind of negative press is not a good sign. Now onto the original video, which talks about what went wrong from a fundamental standpoint and my thoughts on the film. Hey guys! So I saw Supergirl last week at the early fan screening on Wednesday. Unluckily, it was a few hours after. To my shock, apparently it being the worst film ever made and getting a Rotten Tomato, and even some DC accounts who glazed the film not even a week prior, dragging it, and just an explosion of negative reviews, which completely took me off guard because we had only heard mostly positive things, but I still went into the film with an open mind. And my thoughts? I have no idea what's going on. This film is definitely not rewriting the rulebook by any means, but if this is supposedly trash and worse than films like The Flash, I don't know what to say. I really had a fun time. I mean, the film isn't perfect, it's not even a great movie, but it's certainly good enough to not be dragged through the mud in such vicious fashion by everyone. And that's coming from a massive hater. I'm usually on the other end questioning the worth of something, but I'm genuinely shocked at the reaction to this film. It's very much not as bad as people are saying. It's a very enjoyable superhero story that isn't just made to set up 500 different films or a whole universe or multiverse or anything, just a solid solo story, which I personally love. Speaking of the story, let's start with that, since that's the point of contention with the film. If I ignore the original story it's based on, then sure, this is a very enjoyable ride. I think Ruthie doesn't fall into the trap of being a stupid child liability for most of the film. The villain plays his purpose and is menacing to a certain degree, and the action is well done, and for once in a superhero film, it has a lot of it. I think the writing is decent as well. It's not legendary, but lots of lines landed really well with my audience, like the Krypton scenes, especially between Kara and her father, were very well done, and I think all of Superman's scenes were great. I think both the comedic and emotional moments landed really well. The jokes, especially like the one about Ruthie doing this long-winded intro for herself, were really funny. I don't know if this is a hot take right now, but I don't mind if Anna Nogueira writes Titans and Wonder Woman, because I don't think the script was the main problem with the film. I'm pretty sure James Gunn also has a huge hand in the outcome of it, so I'm not worried for the future. I feel bad for the hate she's getting, because yeah, it is kind of crazy how she completely misread the ending of the comic where they clearly don't kill Krem, and she boldly states in the marketing and interviews saying that they do, but in the context of the film itself, Supergirl killing Krem was the most crowd-pleasing and satisfying ending they could have had. The way my crowd cheered when she turned around and stabbed him, I think it works really well in the context of this film. Yeah, I really like the action, but I mostly mean the practical work. A lot of the action was really good, but at the same time, some of the CGI was surprisingly horrible for a film that had this much time to work on the VFX. Just really elastic and gummy, like she looked like mush. There were moments where that works. For example, when she drags Krem across the land flying, that's super cool. But her flying scenes, besides that, mostly look a mess. As for the final action set piece and that song choice,
hey, don't write yourself off yet. It's only in your head you feel left out and looked down on.
fuck, skip! I mean, I get the backlash, it is really jarring and random, but I'm torn. I get what they were going for, but the execution is just so bad. And I feel bad for the cover artist that sung that, because she's getting so much hate, and meanwhile she's just happy to be in the film. And Craig Gillespie also is so evil for throwing James Gunn under the bus by saying that ultimately he made the song choice, but I understand if this turns people off the ending of this film. The set design is also, again, very disappointing. They marketed her visiting multiple unique planets in the film, but honestly, they were barely distinguishable. One gray Guardians of the Galaxy planet here, then one there. And wow, we're in another generic space bar. I'm not too sure where all the budget went, cause all these sets look like streaming show sets. This problem is only accentuated in the final act. I have no idea why they changed Krem's super cool pirate spaceship into the most generic gray sci-fi ship possible, and the whole final act happens in a brown gloop CGI dust and mountains, and it doesn't even look like an alien planet. As for the characters, starting with Kara herself, Millie Alcock does a great job, obviously. She's an amazing actor. She also has a great physicality and pulls off most of the jokes pretty well. Like when she did the ditzy blonde at the bar with Lobo. She is the emotional anchor of the film and has to carry it on her back essentially, and she does a great job portraying such a complex character. Even when she kills Krem, people have been saying it's hypocritical and that she told Ruthie not to kill Krem and then ended up killing him herself. But she knows that she is strong enough to carry that burden with her forever, and she doesn't want Ruthie to have to do that. And at the same time, she's a broken woman and she doesn't operate with the same sort of rainbow and sunshines that Clark does. She didn't have the same upbringing. She had to see her planet slowly die, and she knows that Krem deserves nothing but death. Also, the Star-Lord jacket and the headphones, I'll go on about forever. Because I guess she wears a jacket in the comic, but it looks nothing like the one she wears in the film. And the headphones, they're supposed to be noise cancelling for her super hearing, but she lives in modern times with actual noise cancelling headphones that would have fit her role better as a young woman, instead of fitting James Gunn's random retro obsession into everything. Her suit, however, looks amazing, and it's one of the best live action superhero suits ever put to screen in my opinion, and a perfect rendition of the comic suit. Ruthie surprised me though, because I thought it was gonna be typical movie fashion where she's an annoying liability constantly in danger and needing to be saved by Supergirl, but to my surprise, she's very funny and more importantly competent and smart. I like how brave she was when she escaped her prison herself, and my crowd cheered because we kind of weren't expecting it. And yeah, I really liked Ruthie a lot, but I'm not sure they completely sold her bond with Kara, especially since the film takes place over the course of 3 days instead of over the course of a few months, which is how the comic happens. Their bond is very contrived and rushed, and maybe this is the fault of the writing, but also the fault of it being such a short film. I think their relationship suffered a lot from being one note and not believable. Lobo, I'm gonna be honest, I'm apathetic towards. He was just kind of there. Most of his action sequences had been spoiled beforehand, and he kind of just leaves in the final act. Jason Momoa is kind of just having fun and playing himself. None of the jokes or moments particularly moved me, and I personally prefer him as Aquaman. And finally, Krem. Yeah, he's a one-note generic evil villain who eats food in random scenes menacingly, which is a surprisingly common trope, but male superhero films and action films have thrived for decades with mediocre one-note villains, and why can't Supergirl have that kind of throwaway villain? But I'm not too sure why they added the child bride storyline. It didn't really add anything to his character besides just making him more despicable, because Supergirl doesn't really have an emotional connection with the trafficked girls, and even at the end when she kills Krem, she doesn't even mention that. She's like, this is for my dog and this is for what you did to Ruthie, without even mentioning. I thought the journey would be her at the end coming to realize that this journey she went on was for the greater good because she helped all these girls, and that made her feel whole, and that fulfilled her, and that's what gave her the feeling of, maybe I can get better, maybe I can feel fulfilled again by saving these girls. But it wasn't even mentioned in the final conclusion, which to me was crazy. So yeah, that may seem like a lot of negatives, and yes, the film is very flawed, but I had a really fun time watching it, and it's just a run-of-the-mill space western we've seen so many times before, but I don't think it deserves to be dragged through the mud. I think that's mostly because of misogyny and people's disappointment with the adaptation of the comic itself rather than the movie as an individual product. So, what went wrong? Let's do the autopsy. The first issue is starting from the foundation. This movie should have never even been made. As a story with such vast proportions on a relatively small budget for a superhero movie, this is a recipe for disaster. And James Gunn, supposedly being such a big fan of the original comic, should have known that butchering it to service this small budget was a bad idea to begin with. This movie should have been animated, and yes, I get that Western audiences are unfortunately not the biggest fan of adult animation, but Spider-Verse pulled it off well and did a lot for that genre of film, and the original comic getting a high quality animated film would have done the comic justice, and it could have been a big hit if marketed correctly. If just not making the film wasn't an option, we need to address what in my opinion is the biggest issue that is stopping the general public from going to see this film and is looming like a dark cloud over people who even have watched it: the aesthetics and visuals. It's very easy to have a colorful film with a tighter budget. We've seen it countless times before. I don't think we can chalk up the film being this ugly to purely the budget. It's directorial vision by Craig Gillespie. Yes, I understand that James Gunn created the Guardians of the Galaxy visual aesthetic, but since then it has become the standard of comedic space adventures, and this movie looks like any other recent Netflix sci-fi movie. It looks generic with the ugly gray and the ugly CGI, the type of movie that audiences have been conditioned over the past few years to see at home and not be worthy of a trip to the theater for most people. And as for the people that watch the film, it is way harder to get behind a film and its substance if it looks ugly and it has a very visually unappealing color and look. Especially in this case, because the contrast between the comic and the movie is genuinely so insane that I can't even put it into words. Also, we just got the sales data for the sale of graphic novels, and Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow Compact Edition is up there, which means that the cross promotion they've been doing is working. But it doesn't work when you advertise the film as a direct adaptation of the comic instead of what it actually is an original story inspired by the comic, because in all regards, the only thing similar about the comic and the film are the three leads and the basic plot motivations. Other than that, it's a completely original story that adds unnecessary fluff like the trafficking storyline, which takes up precious time in an already very short film. 1 hour and 40 minutes is so short. That is rom-com style short. This movie desperately needed a third act, because as it is, it's just a first and a second act and the movie ends. We need a final action set piece worthy of the film, and we needed more time to develop Krem as a villain and develop Kara and Ruthie's relationship. Another thing I hated was the creature design. We have so many iconic alien races in DC. The Martians, the Tamaranians, Thanagarians, and even the Kaluans, if they're gonna do that origin for Brainiac, alongside the whole Lantern spectrum, who are literally responsible for dealing with threats like Krem. But no, we got Star Wars ripoff and Guardians of the Galaxy comedic James Gunn dupe aliens. It was as simple as including someone with orange skin or wings, or even mentioning their their planets. And I know people glazing James Gunn's creature design would be like, not everything has to be set up for something else. It's not set up, it's just Supergirl existing in the greater DC universe, and not some generic space movie. At the end of the day, the film isn't nearly as bad as people are saying. It's mostly fueled by some weird revenge that the major trades are taking on James Gunn, but kind of rightfully so, because his ego is a bit astronomical and he acts a bit too petty towards them, unlike other studio heads, instead of just being normal and doing his job. But it is so sad that they're using Millie Alcock, Anna Nogueira, they're using the cover artist of the final needle drop, all these women as the face of the hate campaign. Variety specifically, even the devil rests. Every hour it's a new article misquoting Millie Alcock's quote from like 3 months ago, or randomly creating another Armageddon headline about the bomb of the movie. It's so sad. It's just an unfortunate situation. It's an unfortunate stumble for DC this early in the new relaunch, but I think it can be corrected. I think there are lessons to be learned. The correct lessons, which I don't think they're learning, but we'll discuss that in another video. Let me know what you guys think.